Actually, I always forget, once you get used to living in a place, you forget that not everyone knows you. When we go in there to eat, I'm like, we joke about getting brownie points for sure. My dad's spending like a fish right now. No, but something drinking. Well, he doesn't do that, but he's spending that for sure. I don't think my that doesn't count. He also buys tractors for tractors. And he goes through they just got the terming part. I'm going to just stealth arrival in the park. So at some point I'm going to have to roll and go under. Yeah, I was surprised. Here he comes. Yeah, I see. They stopped.
Hi, Mom.
Oh my goodness, I'm gonna roll for sure. My son wants to see things like we do.
Okay, live?
Hey, 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 today's the day. That's my relatives. I only have 13 here.
Brownie section.
There's a mini reunion thanks
Yes.
to this lady that gave me a birthday present saying she was going to come and show. And so here she is. Let me say this much. I don't know what she's going to say, so I'm not responsible. And I'm not responsible for being married or married.
Back it up.
I'm not responsible for being born into this family, and neither is anybody else here. And you didn't choose your family either, nor even your birth order. But I am glad to know some of these people, you know, all of them. So she's spent a lot of time, I imagine, preparing for what she's going to tell us and show us. And I want to say, too, that in this body of church, we spend a lot of time, thanks to the preachers, we spend a lot of time preparing for another climb, no, another third heaven. going even higher than Mount Everest, which is the tallest one on this whole planet, as you know. And I've looked up on my phone, and you'll have to tell me, 2909 or 29109. But anyhow, it's yours.
Okay,
It's
sounds
yours.
good.
So glad that you folks came and glad these folks came.
You ready? I'm gonna climb because that's what I love to do. So I'm gonna come right up here. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Hello, everyone. I am Wendy Gustin Brown Eyes. And first of all, I want to start off by thanking my Aunt Eleanor for having me come here and putting this all together. And it is something, we started talking last March on her birthday when I called to wish her a happy birthday. I had just gotten back. I get an opportunity to do some speaking about my experience on Everest. And so I had just gotten back from a speaking engagement, and she said, boy, I sure wish I could hear a recording of that one day. And I said, well, I can do something better for you. I can come to you and tell you all about it. So that's why I'm here today. On May the 21st in Nepal, I'm sorry, it was the 22nd, May 22nd, 2017, Nepal. It was still May 21st over here in the States. I became the 465th female to ever stand on the summit Everest. And it was a long road getting there. Thank you. So I like to kind of start my talks speaking a little bit to how the passion started, how did I get there. You don't typically, well, unless you're a timmerman, you don't typically wake up and think, hey, I think one day I'll climb Mount Everest. And so how my passion got started, it was early 2007. I was living in Southern California. I had the opportunity to go and hear a woman speak about her experience on Mount Everest. And at the time, I was just transitioning. I had been a runner for a long time. Some injuries forced me to switch over to more hiking. And part of my personality, I guess I don't really tend to do things a little bit. When I got into hiking, the next thing I knew, I was climbing everything in Southern California. And I got to go to this event. Her name was Trent Young. She was the 12th American female to ever summit Everest. And she had done that in 2003. When I heard her speak in 2007, I kept watching her face. It was a setup much like this. She kept looking back as she was speaking, and I was watching her face the whole time as she was going through her photographs, and it was like she was there again, and I had this building feeling in my stomach. I just knew in that moment that not only one day that I would, in fact, do it, but that I also could do it. And so I turned to my friend that I was there with, and I was like, I'm going to do that. And she was like, yeah, sure, whatever, that sounds great. And in my heart and soul, I knew that one day it was going to happen. It's very famous. If any of you have heard, oftentimes everyone that has ever climbed Mount Everest, people will ask all the time, why would you want to do that? And so there's a famous saying, most people will say, because it's there. Because historically, George Mallory always said that back in 1924, he did have an attempt and he lost his life on Everest. But that's a famous quote among climbers. And so in 2007, my quote was, because I know I can. And then to give a shout out to Aunt Eleanor. Most of you know Aunt Eleanor as well as I do. And anyone in this room knows that the sense of adventure that kind of courses through my veins, I got from this amazing woman over here. So that same spirit helped carry me to the top. Okay. Oh, man. So fast forward 10 years, taking on something like this, an expedition like climbing Mount Everest. It takes a great deal of training. It takes a great deal of saving. And I always knew from the moment that I decided I was going to do it, I knew that I was going to have to take a step every year to get me there. So the training that started in early '07 until I went ahead and signed up and went and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, it was really only about 8 months later that I got my first real big summit under my belt. So things started clicking into place for me pretty early on. Every year I took some kind of step. I opened savings accounts and just started saving my money like crazy. And my motto the whole time was always, if I put myself in a position where when the chips all fall into place, if I'm ready to go, then this will happen for me. But I had to really trust the universe and trust God and know that one day I would be in that position and I was going to make sure I was ready. So over the years, I climbed a lot of mountains along the way. In South America, North America, I climbed Denali in Alaska. And not long after I got back from Denali, this was in 2016, the missing chip that was happening was the fact that I couldn't get time off of my job. In 2016, I had just gotten back from climbing Denali in Alaska, and my last chip fell into place because the company I was working for went through a big reorganization, and I got laid off. And right? And so again, you have to trust that this is the right thing to happen. Normally, that would have been something that would have terrified me. I was single at the time. I was my only source of income, and I really saw it as an opportunity rather than seeing it as something that was horrible happening. I only had 7 months to go to the Everest climbing season. So it worked out perfectly. I was able to kind of throw everything together. I was in great climbing shape, and the universe finally gave me what I wanted. So the first step in climbing Mount Everest is making sure that you have all of the right equipment. And this was my living room. I lived in Golden, Colorado at the time, and it became a 7-month staging area for all of the equipment that I had to shove into these 3 backpacks. So I was able to squeeze about, I would say it was probably 200 pounds worth of stuff into these 3 bags. On March 28th, I departed Denver, and the first stop along the way is Kathmandu. So Kathmandu, huge city. We fly in, you meet your expedition team, you meet with all the guides. I was very fortunate in that my guide was also based in Golden, Colorado. So a lot of the prep in those 7 months before I left, we were able to do together. But we met the rest of our expedition team and hung out for about 2 or 3 days in Kathmandu. From Kathmandu, you fly into a small little village called Lukla. And you could see that arm reaching up in the background there. That's our pilot's arm. You're on these small little planes. Everything's very open. You leave Kathmandu and you have to land, you're just under 10,000 feet. There's mountains surrounding all around you. And the runway it's a very short runway. So their answer to a short runway is that they make it go uphill. And so at the end of this is a huge concrete wall backed by a mountain. And so the pilots have to go through an extra 2 years of training in order to make sure that they're able to land on this runway. So it's quite an interesting thing, and you're landing in between all of these huge mountain peaks. So the wind can get a little bit bumpy. So it's kind of a famous thing, like if you can survive landing in the village of Lukla, then Everest is the easy part after that. So again, here's that runway, the concrete wall at the end of it. The second shot is a picture that I took looking back down the runway. It's a pretty amazing place to start out the long trek to base camp. This was another shot that I took to kind of give you perspective. In every direction, there's these amazing peaks, a lot of them not even named, and they're way taller than anything that you would find here in the United States, and they don't even have a name because they don't compare to some of the other surrounding mountains. As you can imagine, I was in a pretty good mood about getting off that plane. This is me coming off. I was very happy to be there. The other picture is that's the baggage handlers at the Lukla airport. And the running joke is that the wheels on this cart are the last wheels that you will see for months on end, because there's really no roads. To get from the village of Lukla to base camp, you're going from just under 10,000 feet up to 17,500 feet, and it's about 50 miles through a series of villages that are just amazing throughout Nepal. So the whole purpose of going over as early, this was right around April 1st or 2nd, where we started off in Lukla, and then you go through, these are the names of all the different villages that we went through along the way. the climbing season, there's a weather window that opens up that allows you to get to the top of that summit of Everest that is usually somewhere early May till about the second or third week in May. And you never know when that weather window is going to happen. But you go over nice and early in order to be able to acclimate and get used to, and when you get to Everest Base Camp, you're staying long-term, from April 10th up until May 25th, I lived at 17,500 feet. So to prepare your body for that type of atmospheric pressure and not constantly feel sick, we took a solid 10 days going through these villages and did these acclimation hikes along the way. And this picture is of one of the very typical little huts. So it's very cold in here. It's slightly warmer than if you're staying in a tent, but these are not heated. They're called tea rooms, and each little lodge, basically everything over there is to support the climbing and trekking industry. And so we stayed in these awesome little tea huts that had the most amazing food ever. When you're going from Lukla to base camp, you're going through a series of villages, so you're not really necessarily on this, like what you would consider a hiking trail. A lot of stairs, you're going from village to village, and a lot of up and down. There's a lot of tradition in Nepal. The primary religion is Hinduism, but there's also a great deal of Buddhism as well. And so their traditions, these are all Hindu scriptures, and you have to kind of follow the rules for good luck. So when you get to one of these prayer rocks, you'll see the gentleman with the yellow backpack. You always have to go clockwise around it on the way up, and on the way down, you go counterclockwise. And the amazing Nepalese Sherpa, if they see you about to make a mistake, they grab you and make sure that you go the right way because they don't want anything to jeopardize the climbing season. You're also constantly crossing over this amazing river, and these are suspension bridges. The trail will go along on one side of the river, and then for whatever reason, it was time to move the trail to the other side of the river. So there's just a lot of back and forth, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely magnificent. There's mountains everywhere. There's rhododendron. That's the national flower of Nepal. And then you have to watch out for the yaks. So at the same time that we're hiking there, they are also in the process of setting up Everest Base Camp. Everest Base Camp becomes overnight the second largest city in Nepal to Kathmandu, because there's usually between Sherpa, porters, and climbers, there's probably 1,500 people that spend the spring at base camp. So everything that is needed to basically set up this small city are transported by both yaks, as well as these amazing porters. The majority of the people, I would say, stand at about 5 feet tall. These three gentlemen were carrying these 3 packs, and they are mountains above them. They can carry, I very seriously don't think that I could carry the amount of weight. You see the strap on the bottom. They utilize their foreheads in order to not put all of the pressure on their shoulders. And so the strap comes across their head, and if it weren't for these amazing people, then the climbing season just would not happen in Nepal. Along the way, we didn't go straight there. There would be certain times that we would spend a couple of nights in each little village, and then we would do this acclimation hike. So with climbing, what you always want to do is you want to go high, sit for a couple of hours. It builds up your blood cells to help you to acclimate, and then you come back low and you sleep low. So the whole process, and we don't stop once we get to base camp. We did the same thing the whole time leading up to our summit bid. So this is just an example of, we're going along, we're moving constantly from that 10,000 foot range up to 17,000, and along the way, we would shoot up to higher peaks, sometimes as high as 18,000 feet on our acclimation hikes. Which for me, that was, leading up to this, that was a pretty good climb of mine on a mountain in South America. So it was really just an amazing experience. After 10 days, you finally arrive at base camp. And so all of those colors, the yellows and the oranges and a couple of blues, those are all tents. This is, we had climbed up a little bit higher than the trail, going toward one of the mountains just across the way, Pumore. They have a base camp up there, and it gives you some of the most spectacular views of base camp where you're about to go. And so just to give you an idea of how massive this is, this spans over a mile long. Our camp was kind of right in the middle of that, which when you first get to base camp for your very first time, you wish that your camp was one of the first ones that you come to. When you start making your summit bids and go up to the higher camps, you wish that your camp was at the other end of base camp. So luckily for me, we were right smack dab in the middle, and it was great. It was perfect. We didn't have to go all the way to the end, but at the same time, when we made our rotations, we were already halfway there. What's very famous in this picture is the Kumbu Ice Fall, and that is what they consider one of the most dangerous parts about climbing Mount Everest. It's even more dangerous than on summit day. The ice fall is basically, it's a glacier, and a glacier is constantly shifting and moving. And it's a series of, you're going through these massive ice. You'll see some pictures up close in this, but you're in this for 6 hours while you're climbing it. And honestly, at any moment, something could shift, an ice wall could come down, one of the crevasses could open up a little bit more. So there's an amazing team of people, Nepalese Sherpa, that go in, and they're called the ice fall doctors, and they prepare the climber. They put in ladders, they put in all of the fixed lines, and they help make the ice fall as safe as it possibly could be. This is a little bit closer up picture, some of those tents that you could see far off in the distance. This is our camp and base camp. And so you're living, sleeping on ice and rock we arrived right before Easter. I think we arrived on Good Friday. And so we were there in time for Easter. And so that would have been that year right around April 8th or 9th. And then I stayed here until May 25th. So you have a lot of time on your hands. And it's really important that you make sure that you stay in good climbing shape, because if you're kind of just sitting around and kicking back, all the work that you did to get there, your muscles will atrophy. So every single day we did some kind of climb to the higher peaks around. Every morning, these amazing people, the gentleman with the green knit hat on, would arrive at my tent with a hot towel and ask me, do you prefer tea or coffee? So to say that I was roughing it on Mount Everest is like, I did not rough it at all. These people took such amazing care of us, and they did it with a smile. They did it with so much love in their hearts, and they really, they love the climbers. They love what the climbers do for their community and for their economy, and they took very good care of us. And they also made the most amazing food. We had duck, we had stews, we had steak, we had pizza, we had sushi. I mean, it was unreal what these guys were able to do, and they did it all with boiling water and nothing else. So the ovens that they used, they baked a chocolate cake with basically an oven that was made out of boiling water. So it was pretty, and I had Wi-Fi the whole time. I mean, I got to FaceTime with my mom, with my family. It was great. Team Bote. So the people in this picture, just so happened that all of us were on the Everest summit at the same time. So this is kind of what I started referring to as my support team. And then the three Nepalese that are in this picture were all related, and their last name was Bote. And so the camaraderie, the relationships that over time, over the 2-month period that I was there, you get close really quickly. These people are so amazing. If you could see, two of them are wearing flip-flops. They're running around 17,800 feet on all this rock and ice and everything else, and they're carrying massive amount of weight all the time. The porters, a lot of times on summit day, they're carrying all the oxygen, and on summit day they didn't wear flip-flops. They had boots, but to be, they're just really strong, very resilient people, to say the least. So this was our team, our main team. My guide, Charlie Mace, he's a very well-known mountaineer. He's guided all over the world. He's climbed a lot of 8,000-meter peaks. And so he was the main guide. He was the one that organized the expedition for me. And then Pasang Bote, the three of us did everything together for the 2-month time frame that I was there. So when you're at Everest Base Camp, you can see the Kumbu Ice Fall there. You can't really see Base Camp in this picture, but the three 8,000-meter peaks that are kind of just daring you to come up and summit them the whole time would be Everest, Lhotse, which is the 4th highest peak, and then Nuptse, which is in the top 10. I forget exactly where it falls. But it's just, you're just constantly surrounded by all these beautiful mountains in the middle of the night. A lot of times the avalanches that are way far off in the distance feels like they're happening right outside of your tent, and you're just kind of waiting for them to wake you up completely. Yeah, this is just kind of a look from the far side looking back at Everest. And then to talk a little bit more about this, the ice fall doctors. So throughout the course of the 2 months that I was there were 6 different times that I had to go through this ice fall. There was not one of those 6 times that we ended up taking the same route. And so that's just to give you the idea of how much this shifts and how much the ice fall doctors make the climbing season possible. They're amazing, and they risk their lives all the time. You can see the little lightning bolt I'm pointing out to climbers that were coming back in. So to kind of give you an idea of the size of it, it's incredible. It's just massive. This is kind of at the top end of it as you're going through. Sometimes they had as many as 4 ladders tied together. Some of the crevasses were so long. When you're climbing, you're wearing something called a crampon on your boot, and it kind of attaches you to the ice glacier that you're walking on. So it's like it has these little claws, and there's 2 in the front, and so you have to walk across the ladders with claws on your feet. And we practice it, like when we first got to base camp, we would go and have ladders laid out, and it's a big part. If you catch a toe and you fall, yes, you do have ropes on either side keeping you from going down the 200 feet into the bottom of the crevasse, but it's still going to be quite the rescue mission trying to pull you up out of there. So there is an art to crossing these ladders. And so at times they're down on the ground and you're going across them, across the crevasse, and then at times they're going straight up these ice walls. And so it's just a series of ladder after ladder after ladder for 6 hours. Sometimes the ladders get kind of embedded. That actually is a picture of me. Charlie took this picture. There's certain times that it's almost easier just to utilize your crampon. So the front part of your crampon also allows you to go straight up an ice wall if you need to. And so there were times that you just had to get off the ladder. It was falling apart, and it was safer just to climb straight up the ice wall. So what happens is I talk a lot about rotations and sometimes just assume that people know what I mean. When we got to base camp, the whole reason of getting there early is because you're going to have a series of rotations. There's 2 of them. You go up to the higher camps, stay for a couple of days, and then come all the way back down to base camp. And so on the first rotation, you stop at Camp 1, stay there a couple of days, go up to Camp 2, stay there a couple of days, come all the way back down. Your second rotation is really your major prep for summit day. Your second rotation, you go straight from base camp all the way to Camp 2. You start at midnight, and if you're lucky, you're at Camp 2 by noon the next day. You're pulling an all-nighter, 12 hours, and that is the day that lets the guides know if the climbers are physically strong enough, mentally prepared to be able to, because you need to have your gas tank needs to be full for 12 hours on summit day. Hopefully it's not going to take you 12 hours, but they need to know that you have it in you. So what I'm going to show you now is just I'll show you pictures of Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3. On our second rotation, we do go as high as Camp 3 and hang out there for a couple of hours and then come back down to 2. And then I go right into summit. So there's a lot of activity that happens before your summit bid. And so this is all just kind of compressed together into each of the upper camps. So from Camp 1 to Camp 2, after you get through that 6 hours in the ice fall, when you're at Camp 1, you can almost see Camp 2 off in the distance. And it just looks like it's this nice, big, white football field all spread out in front of you, and you think, oh, wow, I'm going to be to Camp 2 in an hour. And then 5 hours later, you're still going, and you're like, okay, I can see it. It's still there. It's a series of, it looks like it's just this big white field. You go, all of a sudden, you're going along, and you go way deep down, you come way back up, way deep down. And so it's a series of, some are crevasses, and then just some are just, the lay of the land. So we called it this never-ending journey that it seems like it's right there in front of you. Once you get to Camp 2, you're at 21,000 feet. We did spend quite a bit of time at Camp 2 throughout the rotations. That kind of became our new base camp when we did the rotations. Again, the Sherpa, this was their tent. They carry all this stuff up there. They set up your tent. They have, they're carrying all the supplies and everything else. And then they basically have a tent that is like rocks on the ground, and I don't even know where everybody ends up sleeping up there. And they're up there for the entire season. There's a group of them, a handful of them, that never end up coming up and down. They actually run Camp 2. So I obviously had a lot of respect for these guys. This is just another shot at Camp 2. Over the season, it kind of keeps growing and growing as more and more expedition teams start coming in. And you're right at the base. I mean, if I thought that the avalanches sounded loud in base camp, from Camp 2, you don't really get a whole lot of sleep. This is looking back at Pumore. That's the mountain that I had talked about initially. And so you are just surrounded by all these magnificent mountains. It's, if you're a climber, it's, a pretty cool place to spend a couple of months. You can see down in the lower corner, that's actually Camp 2. You were starting to move from Camp 2 up to Camp 3 now. In order to get to Camp 3, you have to go up the Lhotse face. This was also, this was probably more challenging. The 2 different times that we went up the Lhotse face were even more challenging than summit day itself. You have a stretch of, you're going, 3,700 feet straight up. Most of it never gets below a 40-degree pitch, and then you have sections that you're going almost straight up, a 90. You have something called an ascender, and the red lines that you see there, those are fixed lines. Once you hit Camp 1, there's fixed lines all the way from Camp 1 all the way up to the summit. But basically, an ascender allows you to move up the rope, but not come back down. So you're going up, and you're pulling yourself up, and then you go up, and you pull yourself up. And you do that for about 3 hours straight. And on top of it, the wind through this section, it's kind of like a wind tunnel. And so the ice, and there's just constant, you get a little facial. The first 2 times that I went up the Lhotse face, we did not have oxygen yet. When you go on continuous oxygen when you're climbing Mount Everest, it's not until you're making your summit bid and you're able to go on oxygen at Camp 3. So when we got to our camp at 24,440 feet on our summit bid, that's when I got to go on continuous oxygen, and that's when I finally, for the first time in 2 months, slept through the night. Because it's very difficult when you're up at elevation to not, your body kind of almost goes through like a little sleep apnea, just it's high altitude apnea that you develop. And so you wake up a lot in the night thinking that you're kind of, your oxygen supply is getting cut off. But when you go on the continuous oxygen, I got the best night's sleep ever at Camp 3. You don't go up to the final camp until you're making your summit bid. So, again, I made a couple of trips up to here, and at that point, it was as high as I'd ever been, the highest altitude I'd ever been at. When you leave Camp 3, you have to be prepared on the night of this is on your summit bid. You know that you're getting to Camp 4, having a small rest, and then pretty much doing the summit. So you kind of have to mentally prepare, like you're probably going to be awake for at least 24 hours. And you'll get some rest in there, but the adrenaline is just pumping, and yeah, sleep doesn't come easy with that level of adrenaline pumping through. This is a shot from moving from Camp 3 up to Camp 4. You have to go through this one section that is straight up. When you get to this point, the fixed ropes are one way. So you've probably heard some talk about the traffic jams on Mount Everest. Those traffic jams happen because the fixed lines, everyone needs to be hooked into a fixed line, but you have two-way traffic kind of going on. So this was where we first kind of encountered the two-way traffic. This is me in Pasang Bote. When you're at this point, I mean, the summit is right there. You think, my gosh, like, it's no problem. I mean, you're so close to it. But this was probably taken at about 25,000 feet. Again, there's the whole map, it kind of starts to wrap around. You just start to see these moving, what looks like ants and their other climbers, moving along the fixed lines. Then you finally get to, they call it the South Call. It's Camp 4, 26,300 feet. We left Camp 3 probably at about 5:30 in the morning, got to Camp 4 at 3:30 in the afternoon, and then left for the summit at 9:40 that night. So you get there, you have a snack, you try to rest a little bit, and then prepare yourself for what's about to come. So when you start in the middle of the night, well, not in the middle of the night, 9:40, but you start when it's dark. Not a whole lot of pictures were taken until we got to that south summit. But just to kind of give you an idea, out of Camp 4, you have this kind of straight up, and they have to plan very strategically around when they're going to be switching out the oxygen tanks. They don't want you to get in a situation when you're all of a sudden at that elevation, and if you take your mask off for too long of a period of time, you just get very dizzy, because it'd be like, stepping out on an airplane wing, right? And, going from pressurized to having oxygen to not having it at all. So we had strategic stops along the way. The balcony was one of them, the South Summit. And then even though we didn't need any extra oxygen, we still switched out the tanks at the South Summit just to be safe. Once you get to the South Summit, so again, we left about 9:40 at night. On our summit bid, we got to the South Summit, so just 2,000 feet higher, about 4:30 in the morning. And that's when we first started seeing the first signs of the sun on the eastern horizon. When you're up that high, it happens really, really fast. Like it's like dark, and you could just see everything moving. You could see it's like someone has a light switch dimmer, and they're like slowly, turning up the light. So at about 4:30 in the morning, we watched this amazing sunrise. And this picture was literally like less than 5 minutes later. And it's just fully daylight. And then all of a sudden, you've been in the dark all this time, and you can look over and like actually see how high up you are. It's like, wow, I'm glad I didn't see all of that along the way, because you might turn around and go back. There's this amazing thing that happens when you're climbing mountains, where as the sun is rising, the shadow of the mountain is being cast on the other mountains. So as just depending on what side you're on, you get to view this experience. And so this is a picture of the shadow of Mount Everest on the other Himalayan mountains. So as you're moving up, this is where the traffic jams really started happening. There were several teams that left an hour, some just half an hour before us. And so all the people that were summiting around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, they're all on their way back down as we're making our final bid. And so there were 2 different times on summit day that we were completely standing still for at least 45 minutes, if not longer. And so just having all this energy, to have to stand there, in climbing, the people going up are supposed to have the right of way. But in Nepal, climbing etiquette is just kind of thrown out the window. They have the momentum, and so they were all coming down, and so we were standing and waiting. But luckily, the winds were totally cooperating that day. It was just an amazing day. I wasn't cold once the entire time. And it was probably, at least before the sun came up, it was probably negative 25. And then after the sun was up, maybe like negative 10. We had a really good day with very low winds. So the Hillary Step, a very famous part of Mount Everest. It's the last technical kind of straight up section. And we were hung up there that was one of the sections that we had to wait for quite a while. The earthquake that happened in Nepal a couple of years ago did alter it somewhat. The Nepalese government doesn't really want the word to get out about that because I think they're worried that people might not climb Everest, but it wasn't a big enough change that it made it any less difficult. It's still probably one of the most technical parts on the summit to get up and over. I have a huge smile on my face. I mean, at that point, when you get to the Hillary Step, if you're feeling good and you're going to get up and over that, it's pretty easy from there to the top. So I knew what was happening. You're going along that last section, and then the fixed lines end because the top of Everest is just wide open. There's really, you have to do something really silly in order to fall off of it. It has been done, I'm sure, but. So we come off of the fixed lines and then got to go to the very tip top of the world. We were pretty strategic with what time we left the camp. The last group in that previous picture, that last group were actually on their way out of there as we came up. And there was our team, a couple of extra porters, and then some other climbers showed up from the north side shortly after us. And so there were probably only like 5, 6 people up there for quite a while. We got to hang out for a good 30, 35 minutes because the weather was just cooperating so much. It was a pretty spectacular moment. It was important to me that, a lot of people want to, kind of be up there and look around, and there's almost like this long kind of snowbank in a way. And so I was waiting for some people to step down off of it because I wanted to be able to say that I was the highest person on the entire planet, unless you were in an airplane, for at least a moment. So we got up there at 6:30 in the morning, Nepalese, and it was 6:30 at night. My whole family was getting updates from the expedition company, and so they were at home celebrating. You can just see forever. It's so amazing. You can see into China, to the north side, and then it's just really, as you're standing there, 10 years, I'd been saving and training, and I was kind of wondering, what in the world am I going to think about now? But I'll find something. But it was a really spectacular moment. And so here's Pasang Bote and Charlie and I. They have to replace it a lot, but they keep prayer flags and a picture of the Dalai Lama up there because Buddhism is there's a very strong presence of Buddhism there in Nepal. And so I talked about that snowbank. We got to hang out. It was important that Charlie, he really wanted me to be able to experience sitting up there without being on oxygen, just so if for some reason something happened with my oxygen, so he had me take my mask off for about 30 seconds, and I thought I was going to pass out. It was a really bizarre experience. But interestingly, the Nepalese government, now because there's so many people that have tried to say that they climbed Everest when they really hadn't, I had to send them a picture of my summit suit, a picture of me, and then I had to make sure that they had a picture of me on the summit without my oxygen on, in order for them to issue me the certificate. So they've had a couple of people try to fraudulently say that they had climbed it. So, and then that little sign is a good friend of mine. His daughter makes signs for all of my summits. And so it says, "I know you can do it," and "Girl power to the top." Okay, so here's a little video. So we get up there, we hang out until a little after 7. We come back down to base camp. We were back down, I'm sorry, not base camp, to Camp 4. We got back down, it was probably like 10:30 in the morning. We had a couple of hours of just this like amazing, gorgeous weather. And then the winds picked up. And so we did all stay overnight before moving down to Camp 4. But it was the next day when we went to leave, it became very, very dangerous. The moment you would get out of your tent, it would just blow away, the moment your body wasn't holding it down. And so I have a couple of videos here that I'm going to play that will give you an idea of how high the winds can get. You can gesture with hand signals. You could be standing right next to the person and be like screaming, and you couldn't even hear one another. And you could see, so this was the next day. I was saying, we were just up there. But the winds up at the summit, no one got to summit that next day. And then to give you an idea of what I mean about the tents blowing away, yeah. So the entire thing, no matter how many rocks or anything, they were either completely flattened by the wind or they would completely blow away. So we needed to time our departure from Camp 4 pretty strategically. So here we went from Camp 4 all the way back down. We bypassed Camp 3, went straight to Camp 2. Celebrated. It was just an amazing feeling. Everyone in this picture did summit with the exception of one person who did not allow the fact that she wasn't able to summit, because as you can see, she's the woman that's in the blue jacket, and she's just laughing and having as much fun as the rest of us. So it's an amazing camaraderie in the climbing world to experience something like that together, and we all had a really good time. And then this is us looking a little bit more put together all the way back. So you'd stay at Camp 2 for that first night and then go straight from Camp 2 all the way down, back down to base camp. And everybody's at least 20 pounds lighter. And all of us had, kind of wind-blown faces and a little bit beat up. But it's really just an amazing thing to experience, and for 10 years, to work towards something for so long, for 10 years. It was a bittersweet feeling, to be honest. I like to always share with something a little, or end with sharing something a little inspirational. And so over those 10 years, while I was getting ready over time, I did a lot. To climb, it's really important that you're as mentally strong as you are physically strong. And when people aren't able to do it, they usually will come back and say that they just didn't have the mental strength to put up with everything that you have to endure. And so for me, I had kind of come up with, over time, putting together, every step that you take, you have to go so slow. And so this was my mantra that helped carry me to the top of the world. And so I would, with each step, say the words, I am whole, I am perfect, I am strong, I am powerful, I am loving and compassionate, and I'm harmonious and happy. And so my best advice to anyone that has a lifelong goal that they're trying to accomplish is to find your scripture, find your mantra. Don't ever think that you can't do something, and that doesn't mean you have to climb Mount Everest. It could be any goal that you want to reach yourself. It's never too late to reach that goal. Just if you put your mind to it, you can do anything. So that's all I have for you today. I think we have some time for questions, right? I don't see what time it is. Okay, good. We're right on schedule. Perfect. Did anyone have any questions? I kind of blew through a lot of pictures there. Yeah.
Basically, your group was 6 to 8 people?
Yeah, there were 10 climbers total that started out. There were a handful that got injured or got sick and had to leave before summit day. So by summit day, we were down to 6 climbers. Yeah, and then, 6 climbers, 3 guides, and a handful of Sherpa. Yeah.
Are the climbers from different countries, and how do they match you up with each other? Or how's
Yeah.
that process?
So I was very fortunate in where I lived in Colorado, surrounded by so many climbers and guides, independent guides. And so I had been introduced for years before I went, was introduced to a guide that I started telling him, someday I'm going to climb Everest and you're going to be my guide. And so I went to him and he organized the whole thing through an expedition company that was based out of New Zealand. And so the climbers, there were people from Australia, people from England, people from New Zealand. There were just a couple of us, like out of the 10, only 3 of us were from the States. And then the guides were from all over the world as well. Yeah. Uh-huh.
What's the cost involved?
A lot.
Eleanor's planning on doing this.
Yes, okay. So if you're going to start a GoFundMe for Aunt E, so the expeditions right now run probably, they're probably up to about 85,000 for a group expedition. And then from there, it goes all the way up to probably closer to 150,000 if you're fully private. And so you can you can kind of determine, there's a couple of little things that if you didn't want to be fully a part of the main group, you could fall somewhere in between the 85,000 to 150,000. Yeah. So it took all 10 years to save, for sure. Yeah. Doesn't include your airfare, but it includes every single bit of lodging, every single bit of food, not your equipment. You have to have your own climbing equipment. And then that also includes what they call maximum oxygen. So oxygen is one thing you do not want to skimp on. When people die on Everest, it's because they've gone with an expedition company that skimps on oxygen. They finally make it up there, but they didn't reserve enough oxygen to get back down. And almost everyone and I saw them, the year that I was there, 7 people passed away. And, you have to walk right by them in order to get to the top. So, you don't mess around with the oxygen. So the extra oxygen probably accounts for like $8,000 of the expedition fees. Yeah. Yep. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Are you married? Did you marry one of those mountain climbers?
I am married, and I met my husband, I met my husband just a couple of weeks before I got laid off. And then I'm dating him for a couple of weeks, and I'm like, would it sound crazy if I told you I'm going to go climb Mount Everest and not find another job right now? He was like, no, do it. So anyway, he waited for me. I got back, and so I wasn't married at the time that I climbed. He'll go on some training hikes with me, but he's not really fond of those types of heights. So we do a lot of training together in Montana, and then he lets me go do my thing. Yeah.
Equipment?
Yeah, so that was spread out over the years. But, like that suit, the suit alone, I got, luckily in Golden, Colorado, there's this great climbing store, and they kind of did not a full sponsorship, but they gave me an amazing discount on it. If I had paid full price for that summit suit, that probably would have been $2,000. My sleeping bag, you have to take 2 different sleeping bags with you. One that's for up to negative 40 degrees, and then one that's right around 0 degrees. And then when you're up higher, you're in both of them. And so those sleeping bags are all $1,000, everything, each piece of equipment is right around $1,000. Like the boots, $1,000. So I was really fortunate that, they threw me a really significant discount. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I absolutely. The Lhotse, which is right next to Everest, our intention was that we were going to come down from Everest, sleep for about 4 or 5 hours, and then tack on Lhotse. And so I've not given up on Lhotse yet. I definitely want to go back and at least get Lhotse. I'll get Lhotse first, and then if I could get sponsorship, I'm not gonna, not gonna save up again. But if I were to get some kind of sponsorship, I would love to do the combination that we were supposed to do. Yeah. I still have my guide, Charlie, he was 62 when he guided me on Everest. I'm only 50, I'll be 51 soon. So I'm like, I still have a lot of time. I have a lot of mountains left in me. So yeah, there'll be another big one. We've been pretty busy starting a business in Montana, and so now it's all up and running, and so, yeah, I'm getting antsy for another one. Uh-huh.
The Sherpas, are they so acclimated to the elevations that they don't have to use a lot of oxygen?
Yeah, like so many of them were born at 15,000, 16,000 feet. There's these villages. So the Sherpa is actually the tribe, for lack of a better term. It's a region, the Sherpa region in Nepal is the mountainous region, and so they were all born at elevation, like they were born acclimated. And so several of them do run back and forth, but on summit day, it's the expedition teams, regardless of whether the Sherpa feel like they could do it without oxygen or not. If you work for the expedition companies, you're on oxygen. Yep. So.
Is the economy of the villages based around the climbing, or is there another economy for them? I mean,
They grow a lot. There's a lot of, there's like, they do a lot of farming. But for the most part, yeah, each of those little villages thrive during the climbing season. So for years like COVID or the year when the earthquake happened, which I think was 15, when the climbing season shut down like that, they are greatly affected by it. Yeah, very dependent. So what happens is that the weather window always is about a 2-week time frame. But yes, the overall climbing season is those 2 months because everybody's coming in and then, acclimating, kind of getting ready. There is also a fall climbing season, just before winter. And so that one's not quite as long because they have to wait through the summer, it warms up and that's the monsoon season, and way up high, it's just the winds are very, very strong. It's very dangerous. Nobody climbs through the summer. I think people have attempted a little bit in the winter before, but it's just the conditions are way too severe, at that point too. So yeah, I think that it's about a month and a half is the climbing season in the fall, and then the 2 months in the spring. Yeah.
how many people would summit in the summer in one season?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. It's definitely increased for sure. The year that I summited, they had just under 50%. There was a lot of respiratory. Down lower in one of the villages, there was kind of a virus going around, and it was causing a lot of people to get pneumonia and stuff like that. So I think that our percentage was probably only about 40% of successful summits in my year. And I'll have to look it up. I'll let you know by tomorrow. Uh-huh. So if you count from Lukla, from the minute we landed in Lukla until we got to the top, I arrived in Lukla on April 2nd, and I got to the top on May 22nd. So a long time. And there was climbing, there was some level of climbing or hiking every single day. Now, the day that we did the summit, so when we went from base camp up to the summit, that took 4 days to get to the top, and then 2 days down. Yep. Yeah.
So if you're planning on climbing
Lhotse,
Okay.
yeah.
When do you begin your preparation to do that? And where do you do your preparation for that?
Yep. So I live in Montana. So I have grizzlies to contend with. When I lived in Colorado, I didn't have to worry about all the grizzlies. So my climbing has slowed down just a little bit. I'm limited to certain ranges that are a little safer than others. But as far as Lhotse goes, I'll probably, I have a couple of other peaks that I want to do in South America. And I would say that probably next fall will be a bigger climb in South America. So I'll start prepping now for a next fall summit down there. And then after that, I'll be pretty ready to go. So I would say that I could be ready to do a Lhotse attempt if I wait until the spring in about a year and a half. Yeah, year and a half to 2 years. But because now I know, like I know exactly what I need to do. Whereas before it was like, am I doing the right things? You know, having the knowledge and knowing what to expect and knowing everything along the way, from knowing what to avoid on the way up to base camp to make sure I don't get sick, you know, that knowledge will just accelerate the whole thing. Yeah, and Lhotse is like not nearly as expensive as Everest. That one I can afford. Did someone, okay, yeah.
How did you handle personal hygiene?
Yes, we did take showers. We had these like outdoor showers at base camp. Really the longest that we had to go without showering was, you know, when we would do these rotations, we'd be gone for like maybe 5 days or so. So the longest I went without showering on Everest was like maybe 7 days. You know, and it was a cold shower, you know, it wasn't, you have a water, they'll heat the water, but you're still in open air. And the average temperature at base camp is, you know, probably 10 degrees. So you're, you know, you're in a little shower hut in 10-degree weather. So yeah, you get really tough, to say the least. Like you just don't even notice, like it's just part of the game, you know? Denali was a tough one. I had to go nearly 4 weeks without a shower on Denali. And they have amazing products to, you know, for climbers. You know, awesome little like shower cloths that are pre-moistened, and your hair looks like it's wet. It is like, you know, going that long without it, like you would look at me and would think that my hair was soaking wet. That was kind of interesting. But yeah, luckily Keith doesn't climb with me, so that's good. Uh-huh.
You said that there was some etiquette on the climbing up and down.
Yeah.
Was there any kind of etiquette about when you decided to summit, like with all those groups there?
So they get the forecast. It's all based on the wind forecast. And so the different expedition teams are all working with a similar weather service, and they're, you know, it's not like this competitive thing. Like they work really well together. They've all been in this business for a long time, and oftentimes one expedition team will go and help other expedition teams with rescues and stuff like that. So there's a lot of discussion, and everyone knows, okay, well, we have this 2-week window, and if everyone's going to rush to the top on the first day that there's decent weather, well, maybe we wait a couple of days. But if you don't rush to the top, what happens if we don't get another weather window? So there's a lot of speculation that they've all have been in the mountains for so many years. We listen to their expertise on that. Yeah. I think you had a question?
You're amazing.
Thank you.
And I was wondering, apparently this is a DVD. Is that?
Oh, no, these are the pictures that both myself and my guide took. So, yep, I just put together a combination of.
You're showing them now. What is it on? Is it on?
Just on my computer. I created like a PowerPoint presentation on my computer. Yeah, and my husband, he's pretty creative. He helped me out with some of it too.
Would you be able to
Share it? Oh,
DVD and
Oh. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. I'm happy to burn some DVDs if you guys would like to, yeah, yeah. Oh, perfect. Oh, awesome. Okay, great. Good, good. That's fabulous.
Very good.
You guys are high tech around here.
Your guide, had he been to the top before?
He had. There's actually a very famous blind man from Colorado. He's the first blind person to ever summit Mount Everest, and Charlie was one of his guides. He has climbed several of the 8,000-meter peaks, and when he climbs on his own, he does it without oxygen. He's climbed K2 without oxygen. He's an amazing person. Like, it just blows my mind, the things that he's done. So yes, he was actually also, this would have been his third Everest summit. It ended up only being his second because he was on Everest the year that the earthquake happened. And fortunately, he and his team were up at Camp 2. They weren't in base camp. The year that the avalanche happened, base camp was affected much worse than the higher camps. He got stuck up there for a couple of days, and then they finally got everybody down and got them out of there. So that happened in 2015, and so it was 2 years later that he and I went back and summited. So it was very, he had a couple of pretty sentimental moments about it. Yeah, yep. So, anything else? All right. Well, thank you, Aunt Eleanor, for putting this together, and I'm just, yes.
And if you have more questions, we're
Oh, yeah.
going to be, if you walk in there, to the fellowship hall, and we even have something to snack on.
Yes,
So
there's
come on in
cookies
and
and
ask
some
more questions.
lemonade.
I have some too.
There we go.
So.
Thanks, everyone. It was great to meet you all and be here with you tonight.